9 airline employees stood frozen as Elijah Washington pulled out his phone. "You just lost your jobs," he said quietly, revealing the Blackstar Tech logo on his custom suit. The white flight attendant who'd forced him from first class went pale. Too late. The live stream already had 10,000 viewers. Before I dive into this shocking story, where are you watching from today? Hit that like button if you've ever witnessed discrimination while traveling, and subscribe to join our community fighting for equality. Now, let's rewind to see how one fateful morning led to 9 people losing their careers in an instant. The rising sun cast golden rays across the Chicago skyline as Elijah Washington adjusted his tie in the floor-to-ceiling mirror of his downtown penthouse. At 42, the self-made CEO of Blackstar Tech carried himself with the quiet confidence of someone who had overcome insurmountable odds. His reflection showed a man at the peak of his professional powers, impeccably dressed in a navy custom suit with the Blackstar Tech logo subtly embroidered inside the jacket, a reminder of the billion-dollar AI security company he had built from nothing. Today wasn't just any day. Elijah was flying to San Francisco for a meeting that could change the trajectory of his company forever, the acquisition of struggling competitor NextGen Security. The move would not only eliminate a rival but save over 200 jobs while expanding Blackstar's technological reach. Everything had to go perfectly. "Mr. Washington, your car will arrive in 20 minutes, his digital assistant announced. "Rebecca has sent your itinerary and the final acquisition documents for review." Elijah nodded, thinking of his assistant Rebecca Taylor, whose efficiency kept his chaotic schedule running smoothly. She had booked him first-class tickets on Zenith Airlines, arranged car service on both ends, and scheduled his meetings with military precision. As he packed his carry-on, Elijah never checked luggage, a habit from his early days when he couldn't afford to replace lost items. His phone rang. His mother's face appeared on the screen. "Morning, Mama," he answered, tucking his lucky tie into the bag. The faded blue silk had seen better days, but he'd worn it to every major business victory since founding Blackstar. "Baby, you remember to get to the airport early now," Martha Washington's voice carried the warmth and worry only a mother could combine. "You know how they can be." Elijah sighed. They'd had this conversation before. "Mama, I'm flying first class on a business trip. I'll be fine." Just like your father was fine when they made him move seats back in '89. Or like you were fine when that hotel in Boston gave away your reservation. The concern in her voice wasn't unfounded. Despite his success, Elijah had faced discrimination throughout his career. That was different. "Times have changed," he said, not entirely believing it himself. "Some things change, some don't. Just keep your cool, whatever happens. And call me when you land." After promising he would, Elijah finished packing and moved to his home office. Before leaving, he recorded a quick video message for a group of young entrepreneurs in a black tech initiative he sponsored. "Success isn't just about your idea, it's about persistence when doors close in your face. And trust me, they will. Your job is to keep knocking until the door falls down." The irony of those words would return to haunt him later that day. Glancing at his watch, Elijah opened the acquisition documents one last time. NextGen Security had pioneered some impressive AI algorithms but failed to scale properly. Their technology combined with Blackstar's resources could revolutionize the industry. As he scrolled through the files, his phone buzzed with a text from board member James Wilson. "Watch yourself today." Hearing whispers that some NextGen execs aren't happy about being acquired. Particularly Harold Chambers. Elijah's jaw tightened. Harold Chambers, NextGen's VP of Operations, had a reputation for being difficult, but also for brilliance. Elijah had hoped to retain him after the acquisition, despite rumors about Harold's resentment toward Blackstar. The stakes suddenly felt higher. This wasn't just about business anymore, it was about navigating the complex interpersonal dynamics that could make or break the deal. 200 jobs hung in the balance, many held by young professionals of color that NextGen had recruited in a diversity push the previous year. As his car arrived, Elijah took one final look at his reflection. Despite growing up in one of Detroit's toughest neighborhoods, he'd earned scholarships to MIT, worked 80-hour weeks coding his first security algorithms, and bootstrapped Blackstar to its first million before any venture capital showed interest. Now he was one of the few black CEOs in the tech industry, a position that came with both power and precarious visibility. Whatever happens, he told himself, echoing his mother's words, keep your cool. He couldn't know how severely that resolve would be tested in just a few hours. The chaos of Chicago O'Hare International Airport engulfed Elijah as he navigated through the Monday morning crowd. Despite having pre-check status, he was pulled aside for random, additional screening, something that happened with such frequency he'd learned to build extra time into his schedule. The TSA agent's eyes lingered too long on his identification, glancing between the card and Elijah's face with poorly disguised suspicion. Is there a problem? Elijah asked, keeping his voice neutral. Just doing my job, sir, the agent replied, finally waving him through after an extra pat-down. 20 minutes later, Elijah settled into the first-class lounge, opening his laptop to review acquisition notes. The quiet murmur of conversations and clinking glasses created a cocoon of privilege around him, yet he couldn't help noticing the sideways glances from other travelers. A white couple nearby had visibly hesitated before taking seats at his table section, despite it being the only area with available chairs. More coffee, sir. A flight attendant approached, her name tag reading Heather Brooks. Yes, thank you, Elijah said, offering a polite smile that wasn't returned. He noted how her demeanor shifted as she moved to the next table, her professional smile warming as she chatted easily with an older white executive. Small things. All small things he trained himself to ignore. As Heather moved away, Elijah's attention was drawn to a commotion near the lounge entrance. A man in an expensive but ill-fitting suit was speaking loudly into his phone, his voice carrying across the space. We can't let this happen. 20 years building this company, and now some upstart thinks he can swallow us whole. The man turned, giving Elijah a clear view of his face. Harold Chambers. NextGen's VP looked exactly like his LinkedIn photo, mid-50s, salt and pepper hair, perpetual scowl. His eyes locked with Elijah's for a moment, recognition flickering before he turned away deliberately, lowering his voice. Elijah pretended to focus on his laptop, but kept Harold in his peripheral vision. The NextGen executive watched him from across the lounge, occasionally whispering to someone on his phone while glancing in Elijah's direction. The tension in the air was palpable, adding to Elijah's growing unease about the flight ahead. When boarding was announced, Elijah packed his laptop and headed to the gate. In the first-class line, he was acutely aware of being the only black person waiting to board. Behind him, Harold Chambers joined the queue, standing uncomfortably close. Mr. Washington. The gate agent, a young man whose tag read Tyler Roberts, smiled with genuine recognition. I use Blackstar's security suite at home. You guys make amazing products. Thank you, Elijah said, pleasantly surprised. Always good to meet a customer. Best in the business, Tyler continued, checking Elijah's boarding pass. You're all set in 2A. Have a great flight. The brief positive interaction lifted Elijah's spirits until he noticed Harold's eyes boring into his back. As he moved toward the jet bridge, his phone rang, Rebecca calling with a last-minute update. Elijah, just wanted to warn you. Our sources say NextGen's board is split on the acquisition, but Harold Chambers is actively working to sabotage it. He's been reaching out to potential competitors for a rescue bid. Thanks for the heads up. Coincidentally, he's on my flight, looking none too pleased to see me. Be careful, Rebecca cautioned. He's got connections everywhere and a reputation for playing dirty. The meeting's still set for 3 hours after you land. I've arranged for. Her voice cut off as Elijah entered the plane, signal fading. Flight attendant Heather Brooks from the lounge stood at the entrance, greeting passengers. Her smile froze when she saw Elijah, the warmth in her voice noticeably cooling. "Sir," she said with a curt nod, not offering the same "welcome aboard" she'd given to previous passengers. As Elijah made his way to his seat, he couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. The accumulated microaggressions of the morning had put him on edge, and Harold Chambers' presence added a layer of professional tension that made the atmosphere inside the plane feel charged with unspoken hostility. Little did he know, the worst was yet to come. Elijah settled into seat 2A, placing his carry-on in the overhead compartment and his laptop bag under the seat in front of him. The first-class cabin of the Zenith Airlines flight was half full, with passengers still boarding. He checked his watch, on schedule so far, which meant he'd have plenty of time to prepare before the acquisition meeting in San Francisco. "Can I get you a pre-flight beverage, sir?" A male flight attendant approached with a tray of champagne and orange juice. "Just water, please," Elijah replied. The attendant, whose name tag read Michael Chen, nodded politely and returned moments later with a glass of ice water. "Thank you, Michael." As more passengers boarded, Elijah noticed Harold Chambers being shown to seat 3C, just across the aisle and one row behind. Harold made a point of loudly asking for champagne, then immediately pulled out his phone. "It's ridiculous," Harold spoke loudly enough for those around him to hear. "Unqualified people buying respected companies just because they've got funding. No understanding of legacy or tradition." Elijah kept his eyes forward, pretending to focus on his phone. He'd faced this kind of thinly veiled racism throughout his career, the implication that his success was somehow unearned, despite building Blackstar from the ground up. Heather Brooks returned to the cabin, stopping to chat warmly with several white passengers while systematically avoiding eye contact with Elijah. When he pressed the call button to request a glass of water, she acknowledged it with a nod but continued serving others. 5 minutes passed. 10. Finally, Michael Chen noticed and brought the water himself. "Sorry about that, sir. We're a bit understaffed today," he said quietly, with an apologetic glance toward Heather. As the boarding process completed, Heather suddenly appeared beside Elijah's seat, her expression stern. "Sir, there seems to be a problem with your ticket." Elijah looked up, surprised. "What problem?" "I checked in online without any issues. Our system shows a discrepancy. I need to see your boarding pass again." Elijah pulled up the digital pass on his phone and showed it to her. "Seat 2A, first class. Everything looks correct to me." Heather barely glanced at it. "I'm afraid there's been a mistake. This seat is supposed to be blocked for crew use. You'll need to move to economy." The request was so unexpected and illogical that Elijah momentarily wondered if he'd misheard. "That doesn't make sense. I booked this seat weeks ago, checked in yesterday, and the gate agent confirmed it minutes ago." From the corner of his eye, Elijah caught Harold smirking, making no effort to hide his satisfaction at the unfolding scene. "Sir, I don't make the rules. There's been a system error, and you'll need to relocate to economy class." Heather's voice had risen, drawing attention from other passengers. "I'd like to speak to the captain, please," Elijah said calmly, conscious of every eye in first class now watching the interaction. "The captain is preparing for takeoff." "Then I'd like to speak with your lead flight attendant or supervisor." Heather's lips thinned. "I am the lead on this flight." A tense silence followed, broken when a voice came from the cockpit doorway. "Is there a problem here?" Captain Richard Davis, distinguished by his uniform and 4 stripes, stood watching the confrontation. "This passenger is refusing to comply with seating arrangements," Heather explained before Elijah could speak. "His seat was meant to be blocked." "Sir," the captain addressed Elijah directly, "we can't take off until all passengers are properly seated. If there's a problem with your assignment, you'll need to follow crew instructions." "Captain, I booked and paid for this first-class seat. I checked in without issues, and the gate agent confirmed it. I'm simply asking to see what the actual problem is. The captain barely glanced at Elijah's boarding pass. Our system shows otherwise. For the safety and comfort of all passengers, please follow Ms. Brooks to your reassigned seat. In that moment, Elijah realized what was happening. He was being singled out, and neither facts nor reason would change the outcome. Fighting would only escalate the situation, potentially resulting in him being removed from the flight entirely and missing the crucial meeting. "May I at least collect my belongings?" he asked, maintaining his composure despite the humiliation burning through him. "Quickly, please. We're behind schedule," Heather replied. As Elijah gathered his things, Harold's voice carried from behind. "Some people just don't know their place." Escorted through the cabin like a trespasser, Elijah felt the weight of every stare. In economy, Heather pointed to a middle seat in row 27, wedged between two larger passengers. "This is completely unacceptable," Elijah said quietly. "I'll be filing a formal complaint." "That's your right," Heather replied dismissively, already turning away. A young woman in the aisle seat stood to let Elijah in. As he settled into the cramped middle seat, she leaned over. "That was total BS what they did to you," she whispered. "I'm Amanda Wilson, journalism student. I've seen your TED Talk on AI ethics. You're Elijah Washington, right? CEO of Blackstar Tech." Elijah nodded, surprised to be recognized. "You should record what just happened," Amanda continued. "Document everything. This is textbook discrimination. Have you ever witnessed someone being treated unfairly because of their race?" Comment number 1 if you believe Elijah should fight back against this blatant discrimination, or number 2 if you think he should focus on making his meeting. Like this video if you've ever experienced a similar situation while traveling, and subscribe to see how this shocking confrontation unfolds. What would you do if you were in Elijah's position? Let's continue with this incredible true story. The seatbelt sign dinged off at cruising altitude, and Elijah exhaled slowly, still processing the humiliation of being removed from first class. Around him, the economy cabin buzzed with the white noise of conversations, crying babies, and the rattle of drink carts. Amanda Wilson, the journalism student beside him, pulled out her notebook. "Would you mind if I asked you a few questions about what just happened?" she whispered. "I'm doing my thesis on corporate discrimination." What they did was textbook. Elijah glanced at her, early 20s, determined expression, press badge clipped to her backpack. "I'm not sure talking to the press is my best move right now." "Not for publication," Amanda clarified. "Just research. But honestly, if I were you, I'd be documenting everything." Elijah considered this, then discreetly pulled out his phone and opened the voice recorder app. "You're right. At minimum, I need records for the complaint I'll be filing." As the drink service began, Elijah noticed Michael Chen, the flight attendant who had been kind to him in first class, watching him with an apologetic expression. When Michael reached their row, he leaned down while handing Elijah a soda. "Your first-class ticket was completely valid," he whispered. "I checked the system myself. There was no crew block on that seat." "Then why?" Elijah began. "I can't say more right now. But you should know that." Michael moved on quickly before Heather could notice their interaction. Amanda's eyes widened. "Did you get that on record?" Elijah nodded, his suspicions confirmed. What had felt like discrimination was exactly that. As he sipped his soda, his phone vibrated with a text from Rebecca. "Strange activity on your reservation. Someone tried to cancel your ticket 30 minutes before boarding. Zenith system flagged it as suspicious. Everything okay?" The pieces clicked into place. Elijah texted back a brief summary of what had happened, then made a decision. He opened his social media app and started a live video, keeping his voice low. "I rarely use this platform to discuss personal matters, but something is happening that needs to be addressed. I'm Elijah Washington, CEO of Blackstar Tech, and I was just forcibly removed from my paid first-class seat on Zenith Airlines Flight 2463 to San Francisco. No explanation was given beyond a system error that a flight attendant has just confirmed doesn't exist. He continued detailing the events, careful to stick to facts rather than accusations. Amanda nodded encouragingly beside him, occasionally suggesting points to mention. Within minutes, the viewer count ticked up, 100, 500, 1,000. Comments flooded in, many from Blackstar customers and tech industry colleagues expressing outrage. By the 15-minute mark, over 5,000 people were watching. The hashtag Zenith discrimination appeared in the comments, quickly gaining traction. Passengers around Elijah began to recognize what was happening, some pulling out their own phones to find the live stream. In first class, flight attendant Michael showed something on his phone to a colleague, both looking concerned. Harold Chambers noticed their worried expressions and demanded to know what was happening. When Michael reluctantly showed him the live stream, Harold's face contorted with rage. Back in economy, Elijah continued calmly narrating events, including Harold's earlier comments about unqualified people. This isn't just about a seat on a plane. It's about the persistent reality that no matter what credentials, achievements, or status a person of color attains, they can still be treated as less than. I'm fortunate to have a platform to speak about this. Many don't. The viewer count passed 10,000, then 20,000. Notifications showed that tech news sites were picking up the story. In the cockpit, the co-pilot received an urgent message from Zenith's headquarters asking for details about an incident on board. Harold stormed down the aisle toward economy, followed by Heather. "You need to stop that recording immediately," Harold demanded. "It's against airline policy." Actually, Amanda interjected, "FAA regulations allow passengers to use phones in airplane mode for recording. There's no policy against it." "This man is causing a disturbance," Harold said to Heather. "His phone should be confiscated." Other passengers began objecting. "He's sitting quietly talking into his phone," said the woman across the aisle. "You're the one causing a scene." Heather, realizing the situation was spiraling, tried to defuse it. "Sir, we'd be happy to discuss any concerns after landing." "I tried discussing my concerns when I was first removed from my seat," Elijah replied evenly. "Now I'm simply documenting what happened." As Harold and Heather retreated, the cabin had divided into factions. Some flight attendants huddled in whispered conversation, clearly worried. Others continued service as if nothing was happening. Passengers either stared openly at Elijah or pretended to be absorbed in movies while stealing glances. Amanda helped Elijah gather statements from nearby passengers who had witnessed his removal from first class. An elderly woman confirmed hearing Harold's "know their place" comment. A business traveler verified that Elijah's seat had been empty since his removal, contradicting the claim about crew needs. Using the plane's Wi-Fi, Elijah saw his video spreading across multiple platforms. Tech journalists were tagging Zenith Airlines demanding responses. Blackstar's communications team had joined the fray, issuing a statement of support for their CEO. By the time the captain announced their initial descent into San Francisco, Elijah's live stream had reached over 1 million views. The story had transcended social media to reach mainstream news alerts. Texts from board members, friends, and his mother flooded in faster than he could read them. "I'm getting messages that reporters are waiting at the gate," Amanda said, scrolling through Twitter. "This has blown up way bigger than I think anyone expected." Elijah felt a complex mix of emotions, vindication that the truth was coming out, exhaustion from the constant stress of navigating such situations, and concern about how this might affect the acquisition meeting. "All I wanted was to be treated with the same respect as any other first-class passenger," he said, ending his live stream as the plane began its final approach. "Instead, we've created a national conversation about who belongs in which spaces." As the wheels touched down on San Francisco tarmac, neither Elijah nor the Zenith Airlines crew could have predicted the storm that awaited them at the gate, or how 9 careers would end before the sun set. The plane taxied to the gate at San Francisco International Airport as flight attendants made routine announcements about remaining seated until the aircraft came to a complete stop. But nothing about this arrival would be routine. Through the windows, Elijah could see a crowd gathered at the terminal, camera crews, reporters holding microphones, and airport officials in reflective vests. News of the incident had spread faster than the aircraft itself had traveled. "Looks like quite the welcome committee," Amanda observed, gathering her belongings. "Are you ready for this?" Elijah straightened his tie. "I've been ready my whole life. This isn't my first experience with discrimination, just the first one that went viral in real time." The seatbelt sign dinged off, and passengers began the usual scramble for overhead bins. But instead of the typical rush to exit, many lingered, eyes fixed on Elijah. Some approached to offer support or shake his hand. Others distanced themselves, uncomfortable with the tension. In first class, Harold Chambers hurriedly collected his things, attempting to position himself to deplane before the situation escalated further. Captain Richard Davis emerged from the cockpit, his expression grim as he conferred with Heather Brooks. Both glanced repeatedly toward economy class where Elijah sat. As passengers began to file out, Elijah noticed Michael Chen, the sympathetic flight attendant, slip him a business card. "My personal contact information," Michael whispered. "If you need a witness for what really happened." When Elijah finally stepped into the jet bridge, the noise hit him first, reporters shouting questions, cameras clicking, the murmur of curious onlookers. At the gate entrance stood a man in an expensive suit, perspiration beading on his forehead despite the terminal's air conditioning. "Mr. Washington," he stepped forward, hand extended. "Gregory Thompson, Zenith Airlines Regional Manager. On behalf of the company, I want to express our sincere regrets about any misunderstanding that occurred during your flight." "Misunderstanding?" Elijah repeated, aware of the cameras capturing every word. "Being forcibly removed from a seat I paid for based on false information isn't a misunderstanding, Mr. Thompson. It's discrimination." Thompson's professional smile faltered. "If we could discuss this privately." "I tried handling this privately when it happened," Elijah replied. "Now we're here." Nearby, Harold attempted to slip past unnoticed, using a group of deplaning passengers as cover. A reporter spotted him. "Mr. Chambers. Did you call ahead to question Mr. Washington's ticket status before the flight?" Harold froze, then quickened his pace without answering, but the damage was done. The question hung in the air, confirming suspicions that Elijah hadn't yet voiced publicly. Gregory Thompson cleared his throat. "Mr. Washington, we've conducted an initial investigation. It appears there was a call from someone questioning the validity of your ticket, which triggered the unfortunate events on board." "Someone?" Elijah pressed. Thompson lowered his voice. "We're still confirming details, but preliminary information suggests Mr. Chambers contacted our Chicago staff before boarding." Amanda, standing beside Elijah, was recording everything on her phone. Her journalism instincts had taken over, and she called out, "Is Zenith Airlines prepared to address the racial implications of this incident?" The question ignited a flurry of similar inquiries from professional reporters. Thompson began to sweat more visibly, unprepared for the media onslaught. "Zenith Airlines has a strict non-discrimination policy. Policies are meaningless without proper implementation," Elijah interjected, his calm voice cutting through the chaos. "What happened today reflects a larger issue in corporate America. People of color face barriers and indignities regardless of their accomplishments or positions. I'm fortunate to have a platform to speak about this incident. Many victims of similar treatment don't." His measured response, delivered with the same poise he brought to investor meetings and keynote speeches, silenced the crowd momentarily. In that brief quiet, Elijah's phone rang, Blackstar's chairman of the board. "I need to take this," he said, stepping aside. "Elijah, the entire board is watching this unfold," Chairman Thomas Green's voice carried tension. "While we fully support you personally, there's concern about the acquisition. NextGen's board is in emergency session right now. They're distancing themselves from Chambers, claiming he acted independently. He deliberately tried to sabotage both me and the deal, Elijah replied. We know. But the question is whether to proceed with the acquisition given these circumstances. 200 jobs are at stake. Elijah watched as Harold Chambers was cornered by reporters near the terminal exit, his face contorted with anger and fear. The man who had smugly orchestrated his humiliation was now facing his own public reckoning. The acquisition moves forward, Elijah decided. This incident and that deal are separate issues. I won't let Chambers' actions jeopardize those employees' livelihoods. As he ended the call, Amanda approached with her phone displaying a breaking news alert. Zenith CEO William Parker just issued a statement. They're launching a full investigation and have placed several employees on immediate administrative leave. Gregory Thompson was now surrounded by Zenith's crisis management team, who had rushed to the airport. The terminal had become an impromptu press conference, with airport officials struggling to maintain order. Amid the chaos, a tall woman in a crisp suit approached Elijah. Mr. Washington, Vanessa Mitchell, civil rights attorney. What happened to you today was textbook discriminatory treatment. I'd like to offer my services. Before Elijah could respond, more breaking news alerts buzzed across phones throughout the terminal. Zenith Airlines stock had dropped 8% in 20 minutes as the story spread. The hashtag Zenith discrimination was trending nationally. Competing airlines had begun offering Elijah complimentary premium status. The story had transcended a single incident to become a referendum on how corporations handle race and privilege. As Elijah finally left the airport, surrounded by supporters from the flight and a hastily assembled security detail, he knew that the next 24 hours would determine far more than the fate of his acquisition deal. It would test whether corporate America was truly ready to confront its deepest biases, or if the consequences would fall solely on 9 airline employees who had carried out what the system tacitly encouraged. William Parker, CEO of Zenith Airlines, stared at the television in his office as the crisis unfolded in real time. At 62, he'd weathered numerous corporate storms, bankruptcy threats, pilot strikes, even a near-fatal crash in 2015. But nothing had prepared him for the velocity with which Elijah Washington's live stream had escalated from an in-flight incident to a national conversation on corporate racism. Stocks down 12% and falling, his CFO reported, entering without knocking. Board members are calling non-stop. Social media is a nightmare. Parker rubbed his temples. Show me the footage again. All of it. On the screen, security camera footage from the plane played alongside Elijah's live stream, creating a damning split-screen effect. Parker watched as Heather Brooks confronted Elijah, as Captain Davis supported her without checking facts, as Harold Chambers smirked in the background. Jesus, Parker muttered. And the ticket validation? Confirmed valid, his head of operations replied. Washington booked first class weeks ago, checked in properly. There was never any seat block for crew. We've also confirmed that Harold Chambers called our Chicago staff 40 minutes before boarding, suggesting Washington might be using fraudulent credentials. Parker slammed his hand on the desk. And our people just took the word of some random passenger to harass another passenger? Without verification? It appears so. Who took that call? Who made these decisions? His assistant handed him a list of 9 names, from Heather Brooks and Captain Davis to the Chicago gate supervisor who'd taken Chambers' call without logging it properly. We've identified 9 employees whose actions directly contributed to the incident, the HR director explained. Legal is assessing our options, but they're recommending immediate termination for all involved. Isn't that extreme? Parker asked. The general counsel spoke up. Their actions violated company policy, FAA regulations, and potentially civil rights laws. The liability here is enormous. Making a clean break is our best option. Parker nodded grimly. Draft the termination notices. And prepare a public statement. I'm flying to San Francisco immediately. This needs a personal touch. Across the city, at Blackstar Tech headquarters, a similar emergency meeting was underway. Board members joined via video conference as executives debated the acquisition's future. NextGen's board chairman called, Rebecca Taylor reported. They've placed Harold Chambers on administrative leave pending investigation. They're begging us not to walk away from the deal. Thomas Green, Blackstar's chairman, addressed the room. The question is whether we proceed as planned. Elijah, this is ultimately your call. You've been wronged personally, but 200 NextGen employees are counting on this acquisition. Before Elijah could respond, his phone rang. Vanessa Mitchell, the civil rights attorney. Mr. Washington, I've reviewed the facts. You have an extremely strong case against both Zenith Airlines and NextGen, given Chambers' involvement. We could file immediately. What would that accomplish? Elijah asked. Financial compensation certainly. But more importantly, structural changes. We could demand new policies, training programs, diversity initiatives, enforceable through court order. Elijah considered this as another call came in, his mother. Baby, I'm watching the news. You handled yourself with such dignity. Martha Washington's voice carried both pride and the weariness of someone who'd seen this story play out too many times. What are you going to do now? I'm figuring that out, Mama. Remember what your father always said. Justice without compassion is just another form of violence. Her words stayed with him as he rejoined the board meeting. The acquisition team waited expectantly for his decision, pursue the lawsuit immediately or focus on closing the deal. Meanwhile, at Zenith's headquarters, the 9 employees identified in the investigation received simultaneous notifications. Heather Brooks collapsed into a chair as she read the termination letter. Captain Richard Davis argued loudly with HR. The Chicago gate supervisor who'd taken Harold's call without verification wept openly. Social media exploded with competing narratives. Some praised Zenith's swift action, others claimed the employees were scapegoats for systemic issues. Competing airlines circled like sharks, offering special promotions coded as responses to the controversy. Hashtag #FlySomewhereElse trended alongside hashtag Zenith discrimination. The story had transcended a single incident to become a Rorschach test for how Americans viewed race in corporate spaces. News shows featured panels debating whether Elijah's treatment reflected isolated bad behavior or endemic prejudice. Op-eds examined the psychology behind Harold Chambers' actions. Was it personal animus, professional jealousy, or unconscious bias? At NextGen headquarters, employees gathered anxiously around television screens. Their company's future hung in balance, tied to a discrimination incident their own executive had apparently instigated. Have you ever watched someone face consequences for discrimination in real time? Comment number 1 if you think all 9 Zenith employees deserve termination, or number 2 if you believe some were just following orders. Hit the like button if you've seen how quickly social media can transform an incident into a movement, and subscribe to see how Elijah balances personal justice with responsibility for 200 jobs. The question now isn't just whether he'll win his fight, it's whether corporate America will learn anything from it. Stay tuned as our story continues. The sleek conference room at NextGen Security's San Francisco headquarters buzzed with nervous energy. Board members and executives adjusted ties and straightened papers, casting anxious glances at the door. The acquisition meeting was scheduled to begin in 3 minutes, and the fate of the company, and its 200 employees, hung in the balance. CEO Franklin Turner addressed the room in hushed tones. I want to reiterate that Harold Chambers' actions do not reflect NextGen's values. When Elijah Washington arrives, we need to present a united front against what happened. The door opened, but instead of the standard corporate greeting line, a stunned silence fell over the room. Elijah Washington stood in the doorway still wearing his economy-class clothes, a stark visual reminder of his treatment hours earlier. Behind him, Rebecca Taylor carried his briefcase containing the acquisition documents. Gentlemen, ladies, Elijah nodded, his voice measured. I apologize for my appearance. There was an incident during my journey. An uncomfortable shuffle of papers filled the silence as Elijah took his seat at the head of the table, the power position traditionally reserved for the acquiring company's representative. The symbolism wasn't lost on anyone present. Franklin Turner cleared his throat. Mr. Washington, on behalf of everyone at NextGen, I want to express our sincere regret about what happened on your flight. Harold Chambers' actions were unauthorized and do not represent. Where is Mr. Chambers? Elijah interrupted. We've placed him on administrative leave pending. The conference room door burst open. Harold Chambers stood red-faced in the doorway, security personnel hovering uncertainly behind him. This is absurd. I built this company's security protocols from the ground up. You can't exclude me from this meeting. Harold's eyes locked with Elijah's, rage barely contained. NextGen's head of security stepped forward. Mr. Chambers, the board has voted. You're not authorized to be here. You're all making a terrible mistake, Harold snarled as security gently but firmly guided him out. He'll dismantle everything we've built. When the door closed, Elijah reached into his pocket and placed his phone on the table. I have something you should hear before we proceed. He played a recording from the plane, Harold's voice clearly saying, some people just don't know their place, followed by other discriminatory remarks made throughout the flight that passengers had helped document. This is who you've had leading your operations, Elijah said calmly. Now, shall we discuss the terms of the acquisition? The meeting proceeded tensely, with NextGen's team painfully aware of their weakened negotiating position. The discrimination incident had created a public relations nightmare, and walking away from the deal could spell bankruptcy for NextGen within months. 2 hours into negotiations, Elijah pushed his chair back. I'd like to propose modified terms. He outlined a new deal. Blackstar would acquire NextGen at 15% below the originally agreed price, but with guaranteed positions for all current employees except Harold Chambers. Additionally, Blackstar would establish a technology education fund for underrepresented minorities, named after NextGen's founding engineer who had been pushed out years earlier. These terms are non-negotiable, Elijah concluded. Before NextGen's board could respond, another interruption came, this time, Zenith Airlines CEO William Parker requesting to address the meeting. Mr. Washington, Parker began, looking significantly more disheveled than his usual polished self. I've come directly from our emergency board meeting to speak with you personally. The room fell silent as Parker continued, Zenith Airlines offers its deepest apology for the inexcusable treatment you received. We've terminated the employment of 9 individuals whose actions contributed to the incident, effective immediately. Murmurs rippled through the conference room. 9 terminations was unprecedented. Additionally, Parker continued, we're implementing comprehensive anti-bias training across our entire organization, revising our complaint procedures, and establishing a diversity officer position reporting directly to me. Elijah listened impassively. And Harold Chambers' role in instigating the incident? We've provided all evidence to our legal team, who will determine appropriate action, Parker replied. His call to our Chicago staff was recorded, as is standard practice. He explicitly suggested you might be using fraudulent credentials to access first class. Outside the conference room, the media circus had grown. News vans lined the street, and reporters clamored for updates. Both companies' stocks fluctuated wildly as speculation about the acquisition and discrimination fallout swirled. Franklin Turner whispered urgently to his fellow board members, then addressed Elijah. We accept your modified terms, with one condition. A joint press statement emphasizing that NextGen as a company opposes discrimination and is committed to diversity. Rebecca passed Elijah a note, Mom called. Says remember what matters most. In that moment, Elijah faced his decision point, push for maximum financial advantage against a weakened opponent, or seek a resolution that served justice while preserving livelihoods. The weight of 200 employees' futures pressed against the memory of being marched through the plane like an imposter. The businessman in him calculated leverage and advantage, the human being remembered every slight, every random security check, every assumption about his capabilities based on his skin color. "I accept those terms," Elijah finally said. "With one addition. The education fund will be jointly administered by Blackstar and NextGen employees, ensuring its independence beyond either company." Relief visibly washed over the NextGen executives. Documents were passed, signatures applied. In under 4 hours, what had begun as a routine business acquisition had transformed into a referendum on corporate America's handling of race and power. As the meeting concluded, William Parker approached Elijah privately. "My board has authorized me to offer you lifetime diamond status with Zenith, Mr. Washington. Though I understand if you never wish to fly with us again." Elijah regarded him thoughtfully. "What I want isn't special treatment, Mr. Parker. It's equal treatment. Make sure those systemic changes happen, and we'll consider it a start." Outside, reporters surged forward as Elijah emerged. The questions flew rapidly: would he sue? Was the acquisition proceeding? Did he think the firings were justified? Elijah raised a hand for quiet. "Today we've seen both the worst and best of corporate America. The acquisition of NextGen Security by Blackstar Tech will proceed, preserving all jobs except that of the individual who instigated today's unfortunate events. As for the broader issues this incident has raised, this isn't the end of the conversation. It's just the beginning." As cameras flashed and microphones pressed closer, Elijah stood tall in his economy-class clothes, a visual reminder that dignity comes not from where you sit on a plane, but from how you conduct yourself when facing injustice. 3 days after the incident, Zenith Airlines headquarters in Chicago buzzed with activity unusual for a Saturday. In the main conference room, a hastily organized press conference was underway, broadcast live across major networks and streaming platforms. William Parker stood at the podium, flanked by Zenith's newly appointed Chief Diversity Officer, Dr. Jasmine Reynolds. The company's stock had stabilized after an initial 15% drop, but the reputational damage remained severe. Zenith Airlines acknowledges that the treatment Mr. Washington received was unacceptable and discriminatory, Parker stated, his usual confident demeanor subdued. "We have terminated the employment of 9 individuals whose actions directly contributed to this incident, from our Chicago ground staff to flight crew members. This is not about scapegoating individuals, but about accountability." Dr. Reynolds stepped forward. "Beyond personnel actions, we're announcing comprehensive changes to our training, policies, and corporate culture. All staff will undergo mandatory anti-bias training. Our customer complaint system is being completely overhauled. And we're establishing an independent review board for discrimination claims." Across town, Heather Brooks sat in her apartment, watching the press conference with hollow eyes. Her phone hadn't stopped ringing with calls from reporters, former colleagues, even distant relatives. After 15 years with Zenith, her career in aviation was effectively over. A local news station had offered her a substantial sum for an exclusive interview. After consulting with her attorney, she'd reluctantly agreed. That afternoon, she sat across from a sympathetic reporter, tears streaming down her face. "I made a terrible mistake," she admitted. "I took the word of someone I thought was looking out for the airline's interests. I didn't verify. I didn't question. And yes, I have to ask myself if I would have done the same if Mr. Washington had been white." The interview played in Elijah's hotel suite as he prepared for his return flight to Chicago, on a different airline. His mother's voice came through the speakerphone. "They're making those people the villains when the real problem is much bigger," Martha Washington observed. "Firing them doesn't fix the system that made them think what they did was acceptable." "I know, Mama," Elijah replied, adjusting his tie. "That's why I'm doing what I'm doing next." Across the country, evidence of Harold Chambers' history of discriminatory behavior emerged. Former colleagues came forward with stories of biased comments, overlooked minority candidates, and hostile treatment of diverse team members. NextGen's internal investigation uncovered emails where Harold had referred to Elijah as an affirmative action CEO, and suggested Blackstar's success was due to playing the race card with investors. Harold had hired a crisis management firm, which advised him to maintain complete silence. But his professional future looked bleak. No technology company wanted to associate with the face of such a public discrimination scandal. Meanwhile, Amanda Wilson's journalism piece on the incident gained national attention. Titled, "First-Class Citizenship, Race in Corporate America," it went beyond recounting the plain incident to examine the broader patterns of discrimination in business settings. Her professor had submitted it for a student journalism award. At Blackstar headquarters, the legal team met with Elijah to discuss the settlement offer from Zenith Airlines, 8 figures, with a non-disclosure agreement attached. "What would you like to do with the settlement funds, assuming we accept?" the lead counsel asked. Elijah didn't hesitate. "Establish a foundation focused on supporting minority entrepreneurs in technology. No NDA. The whole point is to have this conversation publicly." That afternoon, the acquisition of NextGen Security by Blackstar Tech was finalized. As promised, all employees except Harold Chambers retained their positions. The combined company would now be the largest AI security firm in North America, with a diverse leadership team that Elijah was personally overseeing. Back at Zenith Airlines, changes rippled through the organization. Michael Chen, the flight attendant who had tried to help Elijah, was promoted to senior cabin crew trainer, with a special focus on customer service in difficult situations. The Chicago staff underwent intensive retraining, with real-world scenarios focused on questioning biased assumptions. The 9 terminated employees faced varying futures. Captain Richard Davis appealed his firing through the pilots' union. The gate agent who took Harold's call without verification struggled to find new employment. Several others accepted responsibility publicly and became reluctant symbols in the ongoing national conversation about racial bias. In a surprising development, Heather Brooks contacted Vanessa Mitchell, the civil rights attorney who had offered to represent Elijah. After several meetings, Heather agreed to become a speaker on corporate anti-bias programs, sharing her experience as a cautionary tale. Her first presentation was scheduled for the following month. 6 weeks after the incident, Elijah sat in his office reviewing the final organizational chart for the merged company. Rebecca entered with coffee and the morning news summary. "The Blackstar NextGen merger is being called a model for conscious corporate consolidation," she reported. "Stocks up 18% since announcement." And the Zenith Airlines story is still generating discussion. It's being added to business school ethics curriculums at 3 universities. Elijah nodded, taking the coffee. "And the foundation?" "Launching next week. We've already received 500 applications for the first round of grants." As Rebecca turned to leave, Elijah asked, "Whatever happened to Tyler? The gate agent who recognized me in Chicago?" "Tyler Roberts. Interesting you should ask. Zenith just promoted him to their customer experience team. Apparently, they're rebuilding with people who demonstrated good judgment." Elijah smiled slightly. Sometimes, justice worked in unexpected ways. The incident had caused pain and disruption for many, including the 9 employees who lost their jobs. But it had also created an opportunity for meaningful change, not just policies on paper, but a fundamental questioning of the biases that shaped corporate culture. That evening, he called his mother. "The foundation launches next week, Mama. I want you to be there." "I'm proud of you, baby," Martha replied. "Your father would say you found that balance he always talked about, justice with compassion." As Elijah looked out over the Chicago skyline, he reflected on the chain of events a single airline seat had triggered. The incident had cost 9 people their jobs, launched a national conversation, transformed 2 companies, and established a foundation that would support the next generation of minority tech leaders. It wasn't the outcome anyone had expected that morning when he'd packed his lucky tie. But perhaps it was the one that needed to happen. Bright morning light streamed through the windows of Chicago O'Hare International Airport as Elijah Washington strode confidently toward the Zenith Airlines first-class check-in counter. 1 year had passed since the incident that had transformed his life and career, and sparked a national conversation about race in corporate spaces. "Good morning, Mr. Washington," the agent greeted him with genuine warmth. "It's an honor to have you flying with us again. Your boarding pass is ready, seat 1A. Elijah nodded, accepting the pass. His decision to fly Zenith again had been deliberate, a test of whether the promised changes had materialized. In the year since the incident, he had declined their offer of lifetime diamond status, insisting instead on being treated like any other first-class passenger. As he moved toward security, memories from that fateful day flickered through his mind. The humiliation of being marched back to economy, the quiet rage as Harold Chambers smirked, the viral explosion of his live stream, and the subsequent firing of 9 Zenith employees. The TSA agent checked his ID without a second glance, no random additional screening this time. Small victories. In the first-class lounge, a familiar face approached, Gregory Thompson, the regional manager who had met him in San Francisco that day. Now Zenith's senior vice president of customer experience, Thompson had been instrumental in implementing the company's new anti-bias initiatives. "Mr. Washington, thank you for giving us another chance," Thompson said, extending his hand. "Your willingness to fly with us again means more than you know. The real test is whether things have changed for everyone, not just for me," Elijah replied. As they spoke, Elijah noticed a young black woman being warmly welcomed into the lounge by staff, no sidelong glances, no hesitation. Perhaps change was happening, however incrementally. His phone buzzed with a text from Amanda Wilson, now the head of communications at Blackstar Tech after graduating from journalism school. Her exposé on the incident had won a prestigious award and launched her career. "Meeting starts in an hour. Board is ready for your presentation on the Foundation's first-year impact. P.S. You won't believe who I just interviewed for our diversity report." Elijah smiled, knowing exactly who she meant. Heather Brooks, the flight attendant whose actions had triggered the entire incident, had undergone a remarkable transformation. After her termination, she had initially faced public vilification, but eventually became an unlikely advocate for corporate anti-bias training. Now she traveled the country sharing her story as a cautionary tale, helping other companies avoid similar mistakes. Boarding proceeded smoothly. The captain, a woman of South Asian descent who had been promoted in Zenith's diversity initiative, welcomed passengers personally. As Elijah settled into his seat, he reflected on the cascading consequences of that day 1 year ago. Blackstar Tech had successfully integrated next-gen security, saving all 200 jobs while expanding their market share. The merged company now led the industry not just in technology but in workplace culture, with the most diverse executive team among major tech firms. Harold Chambers had not fared as well. Despite his technical expertise, no technology company would risk hiring him. Last Elijah had heard, Harold was consulting independently, his once promising career permanently tarnished by his actions. There was a certain justice in that outcome, though Elijah took no pleasure in another's downfall. The 9 fired Zenith employees had followed different paths. Captain Richard Davis eventually won a modified settlement through his union, acknowledging his failure to verify facts while avoiding admission of bias. The gate agent who had taken Harold's call without verification now worked for a diversity consulting firm, sharing her experience as part of their training program. Michael Chen, who had tried to help Elijah on the flight, now led Zenith's completely revamped customer service training division. As the plane prepared for takeoff, Elijah's phone lit up with one final message, from Tyler Roberts, the gate agent who had recognized him that day and was now Zenith's rising star in customer experience innovation. "Just heard you're on today's flight. Thank you for everything that's happened since that day. You changed this company, and my career, for the better." The aircraft lifted smoothly into the sky. Below, Chicago gave way to the vast patchwork of America, a country still wrestling with its complex history of race and opportunity, still striving imperfectly toward its highest ideals. The Black Star Foundation, funded by Elijah's settlement with Zenith, had supported 50 minority entrepreneurs in its first year, creating technology solutions for underserved communities. 3 of those startups had already secured additional venture funding. It wasn't enough to fix systemic inequality, but it was a meaningful start. As the plane reached cruising altitude, Elijah opened his laptop to review his presentation for the board. The slides showed not just financial metrics but human impact, faces of the entrepreneurs they'd supported, communities benefiting from their innovations, barriers being dismantled. On the final slide was a photo taken the previous week, a young black tech entrepreneur being respectfully escorted to a first-class seat on a Zenith Airlines flight. The caption read simply, "This is why we do this work." Elijah closed the laptop, satisfied. One seat on one plane had triggered a cascade of consequences that no one could have predicted that morning a year ago. 9 people had lost their jobs, but hundreds more had gained new opportunities. A company had been forced to confront its biases, and an industry had been put on notice. Change came at a cost, always had, always would. But as the plane carried him smoothly toward his destination, Elijah Washington felt a quiet satisfaction knowing that his refusal to accept discrimination had created ripples that continue to spread, challenging systems and changing lives. It wasn't perfect justice. But it was progress. And sometimes, that was enough. Elijah Washington's story teaches us that true leadership isn't just about corporate success, but how we respond to injustice. When faced with discrimination, Elijah chose a path that balanced accountability with compassion. He understood that firing 9 employees wouldn't solve systemic problems, so he created lasting change through policy reform and economic opportunity. The incident reveals how privilege operates invisibly until challenged. Harold's attempt to weaponize systems against Elijah backfired, showing that discrimination often reflects the discriminator's own insecurities. Meanwhile, allies like Amanda and Michael demonstrate how bystanders can become powerful agents of change. Perhaps most importantly, this story reminds us that progress requires both justice and healing. By establishing the foundation rather than simply punishing individuals, Elijah transformed a humiliating experience into opportunity for others. His decision to eventually fly Zenith again shows that reconciliation is possible when genuine change occurs. The power to transform systems often comes from unexpected moments of injustice that force society to confront uncomfortable truths. In the end, the first-class seat wasn't about luxury, it was about equal treatment and respect that every human deserves. What would you have done in Elijah's position? Would you have sought maximum punishment for everyone involved, or focused on creating systemic change like he did? Comment below with your thoughts on how you would have handled this situation. If this story about overcoming racism resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe to our channel for more powerful stories of resilience and justice. Share this video with someone who needs to understand how bias operates in professional settings. These conversations create change. Thank you for watching. Black CEO denied first-class seat, chaos erupts as 9 staff are fired instantly. May we all find the courage to stand against discrimination when we witness it in our own lives.